Okay, sorry about that. I think I fixed it now. I didn't even know all that stuff was possible. I had to like Google a few things to like fix a few things and find a few solutions to a few problems. But I think I got it now. Yes, yes, I think I got it now. Um, well, I'm still following the course, so I'm still doing the exact same thing. I'm gonna pick up where I left off. I just wanted to fix the invertedness of it all. So now everything should be working just fine. We should be okay. And I'm going to just continue drawing and listening to the course. He's talking about some stuff that he did, showing off basically. A lot of these courses do. They love showing off how good they are. So he's just showing off, and we're just listening to him show off. Let's get into it.
Follows those guidelines. Looks like this one's still in the drawing, so or visible in the drawing, hasn't been painted over. Here's some guidelines.
Basically a spaceship.
Again, all back to one vanishing point.
Looks pretty cool. Show off.
I hope you can see that practicing these simple grids will pay off on these more complex shapes.
These
are a lot of these. So these are all vehicles drawn just in one-point perspective.
Real joke.
So they're really the simplest type of drawings you can do.
Okay.
Let's see. There's my vanishing point. Guidelines. Guidelines. And you see those two little fins at the back down below.
Yeah, he's just showing. I almost want to skip this, but we're not going to because
tips point back to the vanishing
we're going to follow the whole
thing. It's quite
thing.
a small sketch as well.
He's basically showing off.
Let's find another one.
I can't show it to you, copyright, but
simple one-point perspective.
Just bear with me for a second.
You get a lot of mileage out of this.
Dude.
They're still complex forms, but it doesn't mean that they all have to be drawn in complex perspectives.
Okay.
Let's look at a couple more before we move on.
Oh man, he's killing me right now.
Cars. So,
he's showing me a car he drew in perspective.
Follows the same guidelines as those other little flying vehicles. So my vanishing point's up there off the page in this case. And it's somewhere up there. I didn't draw all the way to it because it was off my page. You can see there's all my guidelines.
Okay.
Right? And then I've got a bunch of lines that are parallel to the horizon. And that's the grid I use to build my form. I would like to keep looking at a couple more of these.
There we go.
Just to really hit home where that vanishing point goes, how you can use those guidelines. Let's see what else I've got here.
You're okay. Don't do it anymore. Just man.
Let's pull out another car.
Yes, amazing car. Yes. He's epic with his drawing skills.
Again, this one's on the page, so it's quite easy to see. And it's fairly extreme convergence, right? Meaning we have a lot of depth to this guy. There's my vanishing point. And you can see I've drawn with a lot of sections. This drawing is a bit bigger. So here would be my horizon line off in the distance.
His freehand drawing skills is godlike.
You can see that the center line of the car, or the direction of the car is traveling, is parallel to that horizon line.
Godlike.
All right, let's get back to drawing.
Okay, let's go. Let's try something.
Sort of warming up here for the next step.
Mm-hmm. Okay, he drew a little line right here.
Two-point perspective. If we had taken the previous box, we drew in one-point perspective, and we rotated it in top view.
We just went this way.
We were standing still in the same spot, and we were looking at a box in top view that was rotated to our line of sight.
So we would be standing right there.
Okay. The lines are the sides of that box. There's a line on that side. That would go to
we would look right here, right?
Vanishing point. So we're going to add an additional vanishing point.
This would go
draw
right
a box that's rotated in top view to our line of sight.
And this one
side, all parallel lines on that side of the box will go to the left vanishing point.
Go right here.
So that's the orientation to our object. It's slightly rotated, and I want to be able to draw that in perspective. Oh. So first I'm going to start with a horizon line. It's my horizon line. And I'm going to set up a little two-point perspective grid. Now again, I'm not plotting out on projecting that top view. Again, this is all warm up and practice to help you to sketch in perspective, right? I'm not, you could do the very tedious projections of dropping that box onto your horizon, projecting down.
There we go.
Calculating your foreshortening.
Yes.
All of that sort of stuff. But for freehand sketching, these are sort of the techniques I use, sort of simplify things and keep it more sort of in the sketching realm versus sort of technical perspective construction. So I've drawn basically the left side of my box and the right side of my box.
This is like the setup.
Touch the ground plane. Yeah. Here's my left vanishing point.
Took me a second to figure that out. Vanishing point, vanishing point. Everything's clear.
On the right where it intersects the horizon.
Okay,
will be my right vanishing point.
He and his godlike skill did this, and he put a point here and a point here.
Again, those represent
the put a line in the middle.
Sides of my box. Okay.
This would be the 90 degrees.
So I can lead from the vanishing point here because I don't have to
put a dot right there.
Hit any specific spot. Now this is the hardest line I've had to draw so far because I have 2 points of space that cannot move. Again. So I have to try and hit those.
Whatever. Okay. And then he goes
Not
from
too bad.
here to
I'm gonna draw a vertical now. So find my vertical.
It's cold, man. It's cold.
And that vertical again is 90 degrees to my horizon line.
And then he goes right here.
My verticals are not converging in this case. It's a simple 2-point perspective. All right, let's draw the back of the box.
Way too slow.
On the top. So try to connect that.
Yeah, whatever. You get where it's going. It's supposed to go over here.
Again, just sort of setting myself up. If I miss, hopefully I'm not missing too bad. Or where I'm going to miss, you're not going to see it so much.
Okay. And then he's going back to
a little off on that one. Not too bad. All right, so there's my box without seeing through it. Now let's...
nope. Do it again.
Look, see, there I missed a little bit. That's all right. Don't worry about it. Okay. Just keep practicing.
Yeah, keep
practicing. Looks like I need to keep practicing. All right. I'm going to now draw through the box. And when I say draw through, it means like I'm drawing it like it's invisible. So it's just like it's a bunch of wires. Now that one again missed a little. Now,
it's terrible.
Here's the hard thing about penmanship.
Oh, man,
I think that line just missed. What am I going to do? I'm going to draw it over again. I'm going to draw it over again and over again, trying to make it correct. What happens here is that by drawing it over and over again, I'm sure the perfect line is in there somewhere. But what happens is all you do is add more ink. And the viewer's eye always goes to the point of highest contrast. See, that one missed as well. But I'm not going to draw that over and over again.
Okay.
All right? It's just going to sort of highlight my worst line on the page. So you see the worst line is the one that I went over the top of. This is going to take a while to get used to. It's a bad habit. For some reason, when you get into the habit by adding more ink, you think you're making it right. But all you're doing is drawing attention to the fact that, oh, look, I missed this one. Look how bad I missed it. So when you miss a line, just leave it alone. The lighter you leave it, the more it's going to disappear. Drawing a box now above the horizon.
See what happens?
There's a couple more parallel lines.
So this is this basically, but this is nicely done. This is this
on the right-hand side of the box. I'm going to try and draw from the vanishing point up. See, that would be much more difficult. So leaving it normal orientation, I'm going to find this corner first and then draw to the vanishing point.
Okay. Now, if we're looking from up here.
Ghost it a couple times, try to hit it. Now that one's looking a bit better. Okay. This one's, again, the same sort of thing. Up here. Now you can imagine this is actually the ground plane. It's all upside down. It
this one would go over here.
So I go from the front corner of the box back to the vanishing point. See, I missed that one a little.
Stop it.
Don't worry about it.
This
one if I make it darker, all you're going to do is see that it's the incorrect line. Try from the back corner over the right vanishing point. A little bit closer. So there's a box floating up in space. So you can see you can draw just as easily above the horizon as you can below the horizon. That's really the basis of 2-point perspective.
See, this would converge over here. This one converges over here.
Look at some examples.
This one go right here.
Let's get rid of this one first.
Right here. It's basically what's happening.
All right. Let's talk about some 3-point perspective before we look at some more finished drawings. So I'm going to again start with my horizon line.
Okay.
Now, the only difference between 3-point perspective and 2-point perspective is that your verticals, instead of being parallel to each other like they were in 2-point perspective, I'm going to extend my horizon a bit here, allow me to draw a little bit larger.
Okay.
My verticals are going to converge to a third vanishing point. Now, this would be in the case if you're drawing, say, an architectural piece, and you're way up in the air and you're looking at a very, very tall building, for instance, or you're very, very close to an object. The verticals will start to converge. It's actually probably the most natural looking perspective. 2-point, it's sort of hard to find examples of. 3-point is probably a more natural look, but it is a little bit more complex to draw. So you can see I'm drawing my parallel verticals, but again, remember, parallel lines converge to a single point, to a vanishing point. So I know these guys have to converge. You can see I'm sort of measuring out the same sort of convergence. My vanishing point is way off the bottom of my page in this case. So what I'm trying to do is just set up a little grid. I'm not drawing an object, but just sort of measuring the same gap I did. And if I can get the same convergence happening from line to line, I know that off the page, they're going to converge at the same point. So that's how I can build and sort of point to a vanishing point that's off my page. Here, this one's still on, so I can use that, draw point to point. Okay. There's the bottom corner of my object.
Okay, well, this is what he did. I messed up a little bit.
And now let's connect back and let's draw the top of this box. And that one's a little bit loose, but again, don't darken it up. You just draw attention to it. Let's line this one up. Let's spun my pad again. And let's go point to point. So there's the top of my box. Now you can see that could be the start of the top of a building. It could be a box that we're very, very close to. And you start to see those verticals converging. For most vehicle sketching and drawing simple man-made objects, I don't do that much 3-point perspective. And that really covers 3-point. So again, that goes to a vanishing point, my third vanishing point that's off on my page. So you can see I'm hinting at that. There's my left. And
basically,
my right.
What would happen is 1, 2.
Left vanishing point.
And this would be 3, right?
Vanishing point.
So basically,
again, these are really great things to practice. I know it sort of looks very mundane, and again, it's not sexy vehicle drawing yet, but
this one
it's very important.
Still go up.
So here you can see I've been practicing.
This way.
Drew these first with a little non-photo blue ballpoint pen, and then went back over them with some ballpoint. So some of these are 2-point, where you can see that the lines are parallel. The verticals are parallel. Here's a little 1-point perspective box. All right, here's a little 2-point perspective. This again is in 2-point. This one, you can see both point to a left and to a right vanishing point. And my verticals in this case are parallel.
Yes, it's totally what happens.
Let's look at another page of practice boxes I've drawn.
Okay, so he's basically showing me boxes he has drawn. Okay, so I'm gonna draw what he drew a little bit just to show you what all this stuff means, right? If you got 1-point perspective, right? 1-point perspective, you would basically just draw a square. Like let's say you draw a square and you have 1-point perspective. Your square is gonna want to go all the way to that perspective point. It's basically what is going on. Everything wants to go to that point. And then you just close it up. This is 1-point perspective, right? If you do it over here, you just draw a quick square. And like, let's say your perspective, your vanishing point is over here. This would be your vanishing point. Your box wants to go over here. It wants to go over there. Like, you know what? This is the only place I want to go. I heard they got drinks over there with some Coke, with some nice little whiskey in it. That's what they got. So your box wants to go over there because that's where all the girls are. That's one, no, not the girls. That's where all the hot boxes are. I'm not saying girls with boxes. Don't do that. You know, you understand what I'm saying? This is a box, and the box is looking for boxes. Shut up. Okay, so he's looking for that vanishing point. Even inside of the box, he would still go to that one vanishing point because that is all he craves. That is all he wants. That is all he ever wanted. Yes, his father used to be a box. And he wants to be a box just like his father. And his father had that same vanishing point, man. I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you, those vanishing points are important. Now, that is one vanishing point, right? Everything converges to that one spot. Everything converges to that one spot. Everything goes back to that one spot. It's basically what happens. Your vanishing point would be here. This vanishing point would be here. This vanishing point would be here. It's basically what's happening, right? That is 1 point. That is 1 point. Now, to further illustrate my point, this here would be 2 point. Basically, what happens with 2 point is you would have a line, right? And then the right side would want to go to this vanishing point because, well, the right side always heard that this vanishing point is sexy. But the left side wants to go over here. Why? Because the left side never did like the right side. When it was young, the right side stole its cookie, and the left side never forgave it. No, it never forgave it because that cookie was delicious. I think it was an Oreo cookie. Oreo start wars, man. You ain't heard about that? Okay, so this is 2 point perspective. You see how this side wants to go over here and this side wants to go over here? That is 2 points. Right? 2 point perspective. Now, this is pretty simple because no matter what you draw, no matter where you draw it, it will always go back to that 2 point perspective. And this is when you're looking up at it. It's still 2 point perspective because this side wants to go over here, this one wants to go over here, this one wants to go over there. It's basically you draw one line and then you just say, like, you know what? You're going to go that way. You're going to go that way. That is your perspective point. You're going to go that way. You're going to go that way. That's your perspective point. That way and that way. See? This is 2 point perspective because this one goes here. This one goes here. See the difference? Because this one would converge over here somewhere. This one would converge over here somewhere. And that's about it. 2, 2. This one would go right around here. This one would go right around here. It's 2, 2, 2. Bang, 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 bang. Now, what he did with 3 points is very simple. You would have 1, 2, and let's make this one 3 because it's right there. Now, when you draw this one line, right, this one line has to go to this one because now you're taking 3 points into consideration. But this one, you didn't only need 2, so you needed one straight line. But now you're doing this. This is the one line that finds them all, the one line that binds them all. And that one goes towards this one. So if you put it over here, you could even put it over here. If this would be your line, it'd be weird because that would totally throw it off balance, but it would go over there, right? Okay, so if you do this one, then this one would go, because this one wants to go over here, bye bye. This one also wants to go over here. Now close it. But you, oh, my bad. Because now all your horizontal lines, the ones that usually have nothing to do with these, all your horizontal lines are going over here. Now, no, vertical lines. Dude, I'm sleepy, man. Leave me alone. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. Your vertical lines, right, go right over here. Because your vertical line, I didn't even do that right. Dude, it's way too close. Your vertical line is near. Okay. See? Bang. And now this one wants to go over here. This one wants to go way over here because that one has all the sugar. And now this line is you go. Yes. And then you have to, till it connects. You have to go over there. Now this one goes back over here. And this one would go back over there. So this is where they would connect. Okay. Oh, that took a second, man. Holy smokes. Yeah, my bad. Horizontal, vertical. Okay. So this right here would be 3 point perspective. With 3 point perspective, there are basically no straight lines. Except for maybe one. But other than that, everything is like it's going somewhere. Everything, yeah. And like what I said here, if this one is your main line, like the one you're looking at, then you would have to, like, if you kept the same perspective points, dude, you would ruin it. You would totally ruin it. You would go like, okay, and then this would go like right here somewhere, and this one would, like, you wouldn't even see this one. You wouldn't even see that one. But yeah, this one would go way over there somewhere, and then this one would go right here, And then, yeah, let's say that one goes over there. And this one would go like right here. This would be a weird 3-point perspective. Don't ever do that. That's just weird. It's just weird. Yeah, very, very weird. But yeah, these are the rules, basically. 1-point perspective, everything goes to this point. 2-point perspective, you divide them up. 3-point perspective, you really, really divide them up. It's basically the rules. Basically the rules. You divide them up, you divide them up, you divide them up. Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah. I'm gonna let it be for a little bit because I feel like he's gonna explain a bit more about perspective. But that's basically it. 1 point, everything goes here. 2 points, you divide them up. 3 points, you divide them up again. That's basically it. Yeah. Drawing cubes is fun, man. I'm telling you, drawing cubes is fun. Might just be one of the things that, one, it really helps your art. And two, it really, really helps you with perspective. Because one of my biggest problems is thinking in 3D and drawing cubes in every freaking way possible, from every angle possible, really helps you think in 3D. It really does. No matter what anyone says, drawing cubes is amazing practice to think in 3D. Amazing practice. But okay, let's get back to it. Talk to me.
To me, all of these are 2-point. You can tell that right away because the verticals are parallel. All right, let's go back to this vehicle page.
Ah, man. Okay, he's showing off again.
On a couple of these other thumbnail sketches. Instead of looking at the 1 points now, let's look at the 2-point sketches. Let's see if we can see some guidelines that now look familiar.
Oh, man. I hate bragging people.
So a little 2-point perspective. That means I've got a set of lines going off to my right vanishing point. All right, here's the center line of my vehicle on the ground. Okay, you'll see when we get into drawing forms, I really use that ground plane a lot to help me draw these vehicles. All right, the tops of those little fins are going off to the left vanishing point. Okay, and see how the tops, you see a little light guideline there. See how those all line up. So underlying all these very curvy shapes is essentially a bunch of very simple boxes. Let's zoom in on this one. Okay, I have a set of lines going off to the right and a set of guidelines going off to the left. And you can see the tops of those two intakes line up, the bottoms of the fins line up, everything's converging to the left. So if I have a feature on the left side of my vehicle and I want to mirror it onto the right, I need to be absolutely sure that I'm using those straight guidelines to transfer the same feature left to right. Let's see what else I've got here. Let's grab another one. Here's another one in 2-point. Zoom in on this guy, and you can see all these myriad of guidelines. See a bunch of verticals. All my verticals are parallel.
Okay, still showing off.
Tiny little sketch, and you can see there are my guidelines going to my left vanishing point. See how they radiate all the way through my sketch. See the tiny little fin up here?
Okay.
2 little fins. The tops are right across from each other. And there's my center line on the ground. There's another guideline. There's another going to my right vanishing point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so you can see I really use that grid. And again, a bunch of parallel verticals to drop my shadow, help me mirror points back and forth. All right, let's get back to drawing. Now, let's start to talk about how we can start to mirror shapes into the distance. I'm going to start by drawing a horizon. Here's a little trick. If you're not far away from the side of your pad, you can hook a finger over the side of your pad and you can draw a line parallel to the pad.
No.
Looks like I'm a little rusty because that one's not so good, but give it a try. Say if you're putting a border on your page, it's a nice little quick trick. Just careful not to cut your finger with the paper. It takes a little bit of practice. Okay, there's a horizon line, and I'm going to draw another line parallel to that. So immediately I know I'm working in 1-point perspective. Let's zoom in. I'm going to draw another line. Okay, so this is setting the depth of my object. So there's a front line and now there's a back line. So now I have like a piece of paper lying on the ground. Now, if I want to find the exact center of that object in perspective, all I have to do is connect the corners of that plane. So connecting corner to corner. Now what that is, where those lines cross, that's what we call the foreshortened center of an object or of a plane. So anytime you have a rectilinear shape, whether
okay, you get the point,
rectangle,
right here,
connect the corners,
right here,
that's the
right
exact
here.
center in perspective.
This is the center in perspective, right here. This
all right.
area right here.
Let's continue on. Now, this is what's happening in draft view, for instance. The top drawing, you can see, is just a rectangle.
This is the drawing he's talking about. Give me a second.
It's exactly like we're either looking in top view or in draft view. And here it is in perspective. So what I've got here is I have a rectangle.
And then this would be...
And by connecting point to point, we know that's the true center of that object.
This is the true center.
Then what I want to do is divide that and run another line parallel to the top and bottom.
You go right here.
So in my perspective, that also goes to the same vanishing point, right? Remember, all parallel lines have to go to the same vanishing point. Okay, step one in trying to translate what I'm doing here in draft view to perspective.
Okay, you see what I did? First, you find the true center of whatever it is you're drawing. The true center is when you go from corner to corner, that X, X marks the spot, basically. And from there on, you can go however you want to go. And then where they intersect, that is where you go. That is then the true middle of this thing. And that will bring you right here. So you will go from 1 to 2 to 3. Now, if I was to switch this into perspective, right? Because right now we're looking at it straight on. Like straight on, we're looking at it. But if I was to do this in perspective, like if I was, because right now the vanishing point would just be like this way, right here. But if I was to put it, like if I was to put the vanishing point right here, right? And, okay, give me a horizon line. Okay, give me a horizon line. And I was to do, let's say I was to do this. Okay, and then, okay. So this here would then be this thingy right here, right? We would do this. Let's say I wanted to draw this right here. Okay. So this right here is this one. This thingy right here is this thingy right here, right? Okay. I want to find the true center of this. So what I'm doing is I will go from corner to corner, this corner to this corner. Whatever. Okay, there we go. So this would be the true center of it, right? Now, because this is the true center, from here, we are going to go back to this vanishing point. Whatever. Yo, it's cold out here, man. Whatever it is, it's cold out here. But okay. So now we have the true center going to the vanishing point. We have the true center of this. So now this point right here is what you want to do. So from this right here, we're going to go just make that line. Just make that line. Make that line. Bang. You see what just happened? You see what just happened? We now have the end of this exact same thing in perspective. It is the exact same size. This is the exact same size as this one. It's the exact same size as that one. And then you want to find like you want to find the true center of it. And the true center would be right here. These two are the exact same size. Exact same. The only difference is they're in perspective. So this one is further away from you, but it's the exact same size. Exact same size. I promise you. I promise you. And that's the image he's showing us right now.
I would draw a line from the top corner through the midpoint, okay, until it intersects the lower line. So let's look at that same construction in perspective. You can see that I've got my verticals. I've crossed it to find center. I projected across to the vanishing point, and I drew that diagonal. So I'm going to repeat this construction for you up here on this sketch. Now what this does is it repeats and it actually multiplies the exact same proportion plane into the distance. So if I wanted this plane to repeat, let's say it's like a bunch of boxcars on a train or a bunch of buildings next to each other. First, I find center. I draw from center back to my vanishing point, which I've done. And now I'm going to draw from either front corner. Okay, there's my midpoint. I'm either going to draw from this corner back in space or from this corner back through the midpoint in space. So let's do that. I'm going to pick the one on the left. So first I'm going to ghost above it. Try to draw through that line. There we go, through the point and hit it. And now where it hits the side of my box, see the line going into perspective, where it intersects, draw another line parallel to the horizon. So there's my parallel line. And what I've done is I've effectively multiplied that into the distance. Now the cool thing about this construction is it just keeps on going. So every time I do this, I repeat the construction. I don't need to find center again. I know where the midpoint is for the back of my box or my plane. And I can just keep going and going. And what that starts to do for me, those could be like railroad ties on a railroad track, for instance. They appear, because of foreshortening in perspective, they appear to get closer. But this distance is actually equal in draft view. Or if you were to project and fly up above these guys and look straight down upon those planes, those distances, 1, 2, and 3, would be equal. So it's a very, very handy construction. Let's look at some other examples of the same thing happening. So what I have here is I have a single vanishing point. This is a construction I've already done, but I basically just repeated the same thing I showed you. And here I can see them. They're tilted planes. One's on the ground, this one. You see, first I find center, draw back to the vanishing point.
So basically what he did this
just repeat the same construction.
In several,
draw from the front corner.
Several points.
Let me get a pen. I can show you a little bit better pointer here. So center. There's my center. Draw back to the vanishing point. And I decided to go from this corner through my midpoint where it intersects my parallel lines again. I draw the end dividers. So same thing, center, back to the vanishing point. There's my single vanishing point. All these planes are in 1 point perspective. And I go through that midpoint from that corner down until I intersect the ground line. In this case, it's on the ground, but it doesn't have to be on the ground. And I repeat it again. And I have 3 equal shapes in space.
Basically what we just did, he just did.
Exact same thing as this construction we just did.
Yes.
Now this is probably the most useful construction there is in, at least I think it's the most used construction that there is in doing architectural drawing, finding units in space. For instance, if I wanted to multiply and I knew that I had an exact square, and I knew the drawing I wanted to do or the object I wanted to do was 1 unit wide by 3 units long, I could multiply that. So here I have a cube, well, close to a cube anyway.
Okay. It's got a cube. What is he going to do with the cube, man? What are you going to do with the cube?
I'm just thinking how I want to project this. So I'm going to reiterate that construction. Oops, looks like I'm a little out of frame. Sorry. I'll move it up. All right, let's try that again.
Okay.
All right, let's say I've got this cube, and I'd like to project it into space.
He's got a cube, people.
I'd like to multiply it. So I've been given a certain amount of units that this object has to be. So first, extend your lines off to the right. So I want to grow this box off to the right. Okay. The question is, where should that vertical go? Right? Well, you could just guess, right? But now that we have a construction, we've armed ourselves with a little bit of knowledge, which is always dangerous. So let's try to repeat that. Let's connect point to point to find the perspective foreshortened center of the side of this box.
Okay, we're going to copy this box.
So you can see I'm repeating just the construction of a plane like we did previously, but now it's on the side of a three-dimensional, well, it's not really three-dimensional, the illusion of a three-dimensional object. So I found center. Now I project back off to the right-hand vanishing point. Now I found the midway point on that vertical. Go to your front corner.
So this right here.
Draw through that point down until I intersect the extension of the bottom of that box. That's where I want to draw my vertical. I'm zoomed in so much I'm missing the drawing, but there I've drawn my vertical, and I actually got pretty close to where I was guessing. I promise you're not missing anything. There we go. There's my back of the box. So I multiplied that once, so now I have a unit 1 by 1 by 2. This is what you missed before, which was not much, just extended those lines. And let's repeat this. And you can see that it's a little bit more difficult on a very foreshortened surface. So easy to find center, easy to draw back in perspective. I've divided that vertical. Now here you have a choice. You can either draw from the top corner down through here. Okay, that's the way I'm going to go. Now the reason for that is that's a much shorter line to draw than if I drew from the bottom corner all the way back. So again, I'm trying to sort of pick the line that helps me to draw a more accurate perspective sketch. Let's say I want to do a box that's 1.5 units long instead of 2 units long. All you have to do is quick draw a divider across there and darken that up. And now I have a box that's 1.5 units deep, right, in that dimension.
Right. Yeah.
By 1 by 1. So I've just sort of darkened up that face, and now I can find this line in perspective, right, sort of get a feel for it, and then drop in the back line, and that's the back of the box. So this is very, very useful when you have to, say, fit some components or something into an existing proportion. So you've been given a package where people have to sit and you know its proportions, right? You knew that the cabin, for instance, of a spaceship was going to be 1 by 1 by 1.5. Well, now you have a tool to draw that in any perspective you want.
See what I did? I split it in two. Again. Very simple.
So far I've mirrored or extended 2 boxes off to the right.
Okay.
There you go. You can see that I've pulled those guys off to the right. Top one, simple multiply, made it 2 units deep. This one was 1.5.
I messed up a little bit, but it's okay. You get the gist, right?
How about this one? It's got a little bit of 3-point perspective on it. So what I'm going to do is just flip the page. Again, okay. My arm, right? Trying to use it as a tool to draw nice freehand straight lines. And I know my arm likes to draw left to right. All right, much easier for me to rotate that page than trying to force my arm to do what it doesn't like to do. So, same process. Let's pick this face. Let's divide it.
Okay.
And you see, because this is 3-point perspective, I can move this around in any direction, and it's always in perspective. So it doesn't matter where the horizon really is. This could be, right, a box just rotated in space. I've repeated, and there's my process. The construction's now done again. And now I have to draw off to the right-hand vanishing point. So try to look at the line above. Draw another line to the right-hand vanishing point. And when I drew that line, I was really looking a lot at that line and the middle line. So there it is, multiplied times 2. Let's complete the drawing. So again, I sort of have to get a feel for where the left vanishing point is. I'm going to extend these, and that'll help me to draw this line and make sure it's going to go back to the same point. So I'm just trying to imagine that same taper or convergence, right? Because my points are off the page here. So as soon as they go off the page, right, you've got to start to estimate and guess a little bit more. Now I'm just darkening up the silhouette of the object a little bit. And you see, even when I darken up, I still rotate the page. So there's a little 1 by 1 by 2 in a vertical construction.
See? Yeah.
All right, let's move on to ellipses. Ellipses present one of the largest problems for people who are just starting to learn how to draw. An ellipse is basically a circle that is seen at an angle. You see my roll of tape there, right? We're looking right now at 90 degrees to that surface, which makes it a perfect circle. When I rotated it, you could see that it was an ellipse. And it looked just like that template, in fact. So ellipse templates are very, very handy. And I would suggest if you're really find yourself drawing a lot of ellipses. It's always great to practice, and I always sketch them in freehand first. But having a set of templates is really helpful. So an ellipse is made up of a couple of sections. Ellipses are, again, let's look at the circle. Right? If I rotate our viewing angle, right, by rotating the roll of tape, you can see that, look just at the face nearest to us, it's an ellipse. So that's what ellipses are, circles in perspective. And you can see as I rotate it, that ellipse is getting thinner and fatter.
I don't have a roll of tape, I'm sorry.
Let's talk about the anatomy of an ellipse.
Okay.
Let's zoom in. And you see I put some little dashes across that. I'm going to grab a straight edge here so I can really nail these lines. All right, so an ellipse can be divided across its long axis.
Okay, give me a second, because he just drew the perfect ellipse. I can't draw a perfect ellipse like he drew the perfect ellipse. I don't have anything that can draw a perfect ellipse. Nope. I don't have anything to draw a perfect ellipse with. So you're going to have to bear with me while I draw a ellipse. So let's see what he did. Let's keep it going.
By a line that we call the major axis. So major axis divides the ellipse across its longest dimension.
Good enough.
Now, what that does is it makes both of those sides equal to each other. If I folded that ellipse on the major axis,
basically what he's saying is
exactly on itself.
Whatever.
We can also divide it across its narrow dimension, and a line that does that is called the minor axis. Now, this is going to be very important because the minor and major axis can be used in different ways to help us draw ellipses. If I folded the ellipse, both of those halves would be exactly symmetrical. Now let's look at how this ellipse can work for us in perspective. So I've got my ellipse. It's got a minor and major axis. And let's extend the minor axis off into the distance.
Well, why?
Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that that line is going to a vanishing point. Well, I want to draw parallel lines to that in perspective. So I know if I just radiate lines from that vanishing point,
okay,
those have to be parallel lines, right, in perspective. So establish a vanishing point.
You went way over there.
Draw two radiating lines, which we know are parallel. And now I'm going to draw parallel to my major axis. There. This also happens to be parallel, more importantly, to my horizon line.
Okay, hold on.
Now, this is a fairly extreme example of the convergence. Technically, it's outside the cone of vision, which we're not really talking about on this DVD. I will leave that for an advanced perspective or a technical perspective DVD in future. Here's the now very familiar construction of connecting corner to corner to find our perspective center. So I'm trying to locate the exact center of a plane that I've drawn around my circle, right? I say circle, I mean it's really it's an ellipse because it's in perspective, but I know in top view it's a circle. Now, see, I just drew a line across there, went through the middle, and look at where it touches our box that I drew around it.
Dude,
it touches.
He made a perfect, like, I can't follow.
Right where we would expect it to.
Bleh.
Okay. Let's look at the major axis. The major axis, right, does not run through the middle of our square, right? So you see my ellipse at the widest point does not touch the box. Now this is a bit of a mind bender. I think we need to look at this probably in draft view to make it a little bit more clear.
Ooh, I messed up.
Let's pull out a circle template.
Yeah, whatever.
We'll zoom out a little bit, give myself a little more room here.
He made, dude.
All right, first I'm going to draw a
terrible.
circle.
This needs to be here.
We'll see how
I
these
messed
same
that up too.
points
Whatever.
that divide this circle okay, we're using above to help us with our ellipse. So there's the same quadrants that I've identified, which are on the template, so important to use those. So first let's draw a box around this. So first thing I'm going to do is divide and find center. So I'm finding center of this circle. And I'm just going to eyeball a box around this that's has its sides parallel to those center lines. There's the left side of the box. So what I should be getting here is a square. See my fuzzy head coming in there. It always helps when you're trying to do this sort of freehand drafting is to get your head more above your drawing and look straight down on it.
Okay.
So there I am trying to line it up.
So you just made a circle.
So I've drawn a box tangent to my circle. Now let's find center. Now we already know center because I have the template to help, but this reinforces what we've done in perspective, right? In perspective, I drew an X across corner to corner. Let's do the same here, corner to corner. Now, let's observe that the line dividing my circle touches the sides of my square, right? Right at the middle. Right at the middle of each, the left side and the right side, just as we would expect. Very, very logical. Now, if I observe what we did up here in perspective, you'll see that that line is the same as this line. And you can see that right at that point is where the circle touches tangent. And if you look above, the ellipse is doing the exact same thing. So what we can learn from that is that the foreshortened center of our square, okay, if we draw a line across, that's where the ellipse has to touch tangent to that square. Again, it's a bit forced above, so it doesn't look much like a square in perspective.
Dude, that was rough. I get it.
So that's a bit about anatomy of ellipses and how they drop into perspective. The next thing that's really important is to just get a good ability to draw freehand ellipses.
Okay. So we're going to draw ellipses,
so
people.
I grabbed a marker here to fill up a whole page of ellipses.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do is get good. There's a really bad one. See how my lines don't connect there? That's what you're trying to avoid. So again, just like drawing straight lines, you're trying to train your arm to draw ellipses over and over and over again. So you draw them different sizes. You draw them different widths. The width of a ellipse is called the degree. So I draw some thin, some fat. But again, always trying to draw them perfectly symmetrical, meaning that if I was to find the minor axis or the major axis, they would all be correct. Now, if you want to check yourself and you have a set of ellipse templates, you can draw some ellipses like this and then grab your template, drop it back over the top, and see where you're messing up. And then try to identify your problems and keep practicing and practicing. When I was in school, we just did pages and pages and pages of this type of exercise, trying to hone our skills at drawing the perfect ellipse. It always seems the fatter the ellipse gets, the more difficult it is. With, of course, the pinnacle of that being to draw a freehand perfect circle, which I've only seen a couple people that can do it. And maybe you someday. There's a page of ellipses. Now, the most beneficial thing when we do our constructions is the orientation of the minor axis when we locate an ellipse in perspective. So what you want to get good at identifying is the minor axis. The major axis, if you remember, and if you want to scroll back to the previous exercise, the major axis did not go through the center of our square. It's really not much help when we draw in perspective. So there I just identified the minor axis of that ellipse, which again goes across the narrow dimension of the ellipse and makes both halves equal.
Okay.
So I'm just going to run around on this page and I'm going to try to identify the minor axis of these ellipses. Here, let's get this one. That one's off just a little bit. All right.
Interesting.
Come back in frame. Again, good practice. You can see that one's off just a touch, maybe 3 or 4 degrees. So go and look straight down. This actually takes quite a bit of practice. And what you're trying to do is draw a line across, exactly in the middle, left to right, across the narrow dimension. And if you've drawn a good ellipse, that ellipse should be able to fold across that line and land back on itself. Again, this is the line we're going to use to locate our ellipses in perspective. Let's try to find this one across that fatter degree. Another one, another one. You can see I'm drawing these lines a little bit different. I'm not using my arm as much. I'm really using my fingers. The lines are actually quite short. Here I'm using my arm a bit more. Again, what you're trying to look for is trying to divide this guy across. All right. Now, if you could imagine that ellipse folding on itself, it should land right back on itself.
Okay. Interesting move. You just click it.
Let's look at another example of that.
Okay. Interesting move, though.
All right. Let's identify the minor axis. Now let's do one incorrect. It's obviously incorrect. Hopefully you can now start to see the difference. If I folded that ellipse across that line, okay, it would look something like this, right? As it bisects and folds over. That line does not land on top of that line. So therefore the minor axis must be incorrect. Let's see if I can get one that's a little bit more correct. There you go. If I folded the ellipse across, right, that makes that half and that half equal. It would get pretty close to landing on itself. Like so. So that pretty much covers how you find the minor axis of an ellipse. And in a minute, we're going to see how to place ellipses in perspective using that minor axis.
I'm going to be real honest right now. I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. How does he even see if some, like, maybe I'm not seeing what he's seeing. Maybe I'm messing up in some way, shape, or form. But okay. Okay. Yeah. Cool. I don't see it. To me, if you click it, it clicks. It works. I don't care. Okay. Let's keep it going. Yeah.
So a couple of important things. There's really only one other thing to cover with ellipses, and that's really the degree. And we're going to get to that in a minute. We've talked a little bit about how thin or how fat it is. But first, there's a bit more practice you need to do. Looks like I need quite a bit more practice.
Okay.
Let's see. So after you've drawn your pages and pages of ellipses, the next thing that's important is to try to locate them in perspective. You're going to have buttons on objects or wheels or rocket engines, all sorts of ellipses all over the place. And you need to get really good at placing those ellipses. So what I've done in this case, I've drawn the minor axis first. Okay, and then I've tried to place ellipses on the minor axis. So instead of what we did with the previous page, where I drew the ellipse first and then drew the minor axis, I drew the minor axis here first, then did the ellipse. Here I did a little bit different. I drew two lines converging, and now I'm trying to place ellipses that are touching tangent to that. So the minor axis in this case would run right through the middle. There's the minor axis. So if it was a cylinder, for instance, I'd have an ellipse at one end and an ellipse at the other. I'm just trying to draw some ellipses that touch both tangent to the top and bottom line, and right there I missed on that one, and have the minor axis right through the middle. Right here I'm just drawing the same thing I drew, but a little bit quicker, using some straight lines. And here I'm going to try and draw some ellipses, foreshortening off into the distance. Now, if you can remember back to the planes that we had, just sort of guessing there at the foreshortening. So, meaning the degree is changing as they go into the distance. Drawing some concentric ellipses. That's great for drawing, say, a speaker on a radio or a car wheel, rocket engine. Drew a horizon line, and then as these ellipses come towards me, okay, I'm going to try and make each one fatter and fatter and fatter, effectively changing the degree of each ellipse. This is a very good exercise, and also trying to make them touch each other.
Nope, I messed that one up.
Forces you to draw each one a little bit larger degree, working your way up to a circle. All right, so that's sort of the next level of practice is placement. Okay, so
hold up.
The second component of ellipses, so you've got
hold up,
changing as they go into the distance. Drawing some concentric ellipses.
He was really quick with that.
That's great for drawing, say, a speaker on a radio or a car wheel, rocket engine. Drew a horizon line, and then as these ellipses come towards me, okay, I'm going to try and make each one fatter and fatter and fatter, effectively changing the degree of each ellipse. This is a very good exercise, and also trying to make them touch each other. It forces you to draw each one a little bit larger degree, working your way up to a circle.
That's an interesting exercise right here. This one is interesting.
All right, so that's sort of the next level of practice is placement. Okay, so the second component of ellipses, so you've got anatomy, we've got placement, we have just straight up practice, and now we have degree.
Okay.
So the degree, again, is how thin or how fat an object is. Sorry, not an object, but an ellipse. Again, minor axis cuts across the narrow dimension. There's the minor axis of each of those ellipses. Okay, we've observed a ellipse is happening in one-point perspective. Let's talk about how to place an ellipse in two-point perspective. It's a little bit more complex, but we're going to incorporate everything we've learned about them so far, meaning the minor axis, where they need to touch tangent to the side of a square. So I'm just drawing basic front two surfaces of the box, let's say. So I have two planes going off in space. And the minor axis, right, is like the axle of a wheel, and it has to point off to that left vanishing point. So I drew a minor axis first, right, and I drew an ellipse on that minor axis. Now the question is, how do we know that that ellipse is the right degree? Well, what you can do is you can check it by drawing a box around it, and we know it should touch in the middle of each one of these sides. Let's see if it does. No, it doesn't, right? There's a line going off to the right. That identifies the middle. And you can see my ellipse doesn't touch the middle of each side. If it did, it would be correct, and it's not. It's off just a little bit. The minor axis is correct, but the degree is wrong. Here's a dramatically incorrect one. Okay, draw a box
really
around.
draw
Does
this
it
one.
touch in the middle of each side? No, it doesn't touch in the middle of each side. So, no, that one's wrong. But the minor axis is correct. So, minor axis first. Again, you know the minor axis is parallel to those two left lines at the front of those planes, so it must go to the left. Here's two verticals. Is that one touching the middle? Yeah, getting closer. A little bit better. So if I divide that, you can see, yeah, I'm getting closer. So that one's, I'll give that a so-so.
I can't really
In
draw
class,
that.
that's, you get a B- for that one. But it is better. All right, so you can see there I've got my minor axis going off to the left vanishing point. Let's try it again. I'm just going to draw a plane in perspective. Okay, and I drew an ellipse. Now, what I did there is I did it the other way first. And if I draw the minor axis of that ellipse after, see it's off a little bit. Okay, that would define my left vanishing point. And there, if I divide that one, right, I can see that that guy gets pretty close to touching the middle of each vertical.
I can't really draw this one because
There,
I don't really know what he's doing
first.
right now.
Again, draw the verticals, and you can see the difference. This one doesn't get close to touching in the middle of each vertical. See how it misses? But the minor axis is still correct. So what's that tell me? The first one was better, and it was closer to the right degree. So you can see by making those thinner or fatter, which is the degree of the ellipse, we can affect where that ellipse touches the side of that box that we draw around it. So I just drew what would be a minor axis if I wanted to put an ellipse on the left plane of my two-part perspective drawing. I'm going to use an ellipse guide. You see how I line up the dashes that go across my ellipse guide with my guideline? And I'm changing the size until those dashes across the short dimension, right? They line up on my guideline, which is my minor axis.
Okay.
And then it touches tangent to my ground line. I'm going to drop in an ellipse here with this marker.
Okay.
And now we're going to check it.
Well, let's
So
follow
at the
along
front,
anyway.
Right, let's draw a little box around it. Let's see if we got the right degree. Let's draw a vertical, right, parallel to the front corner. Let's draw another guideline for the top. Now let's check it. Let's divide this with an X. Now you can see all the things we talked about previous are starting to add up. I'm starting to use all of those constructions. There's an X. We know that's the foreshortened center. I'm going to draw a guideline back to the left to divide my height, meaning my verticals. And does it touch the middle of each side of this box? And it looks like we're pretty close. So it would be a correct one. And it looks like it was a 45-degree ellipse, meaning our line of sight is 45 degrees to that surface. Okay, let's see if we can see all of the things we've been drawing happening in some other sketches. So here's some little car sketches. These are obviously not a complete car, really just the wheels and a center line. Now what we want to try to look for are basically two cylinders. A cylinder at front, a cylinder at the back, and each end of the cylinder is what gives us our wheels. So there's the minor axis, right? That's going off to our right vanishing point. Let's draw across the tops or the outsides of these ellipses. Now you can see that the far side wheel, right? If I look at the wheel nearest to us, let's go to the back wheels here. Another minor axis, right? Those must connect to the vanishing point. So there's my right-hand vanishing point. Those are the minor axes of all those ellipses, right? You can see it touches the middle of each side there, so I could have a box around that.
You get.
And if I want to find the wheel on the other side, if I just extend.
So what he's doing right now, right, is he has these pre-drawn sketches that would take me forever to draw, so I can't really mimic that. So I'm just gonna draw stuff while listening to him because I can't really follow along with him right now.
This box across to the other side. Okay, see it touches in the middle?
Mm-hmm.
And here actually I found my wheelbase by multiplying that into the distance. There I have 3 wheels, for instance, between the front wheel and the back wheel. Now when you use those boxes and you multiply, it automatically gives you the correct size box at the rear wheel. And you know your ellipse has to fit inside that box. So when you try that construction, you're going to find that it automatically gives you the proper degree, front wheel to back wheel. So let's trace through here. There's my minor axis going into the distance. Let's find this one. There's my minor axis going into the distance for the rear wheels. And notice how they hit the same vanishing point. Remember, those axles will be parallel to each other. And because they're parallel, I know they have to go to the same vanishing point. Let's look at a couple more. And, here's one in 2-point perspective at the top. There's one down here. So let's zoom in a bit. All right. You can notice here's a near side wheel, and it's basically just a cylinder going across my car. Look, there's another cylinder at the back. Right? Minor axis, parallel to each other, right? In perspective. Here's a little box around this wheel. Right? After I have the box, I can multiply it back in perspective. Okay, 1, 2, 3 of those, and then I place the wheel in the 4th box, and that gives me a wheelbase of, I guess 3 in the middle will be a wheelbase of 4 wheels. Here's another construction. Maybe pull back a little bit. So you can see just understanding the basics of multiplying boxes and drawing good ellipses can really start to give you the very, very strong foundation for drawing objects. So there's my plane around my box. Again, there's my midline going back to my right vanishing point. I multiplied back, drew another box, and then drew that wheel.
Okay.
So here you can see how it translates to side view.
Side view. All these pre-drawn images,
I
can't follow. I can't follow along with it.
Right. Looks like 2.5 wheels in this case in the middle. It's a great measuring device using circles, because anytime you can draw a circle accurately in perspective, you're essentially drawing a square. So a lot of times I use circles as my measuring device, meaning I draw ellipses touching each other. Here we go. Let's look at this sketch. Back to this little 1-point perspective sketch.
Again, he's showing off.
55 and a 60-degree ellipse. Let's look again for the minor axis. Trace it through, and notice it going off to my vanishing point. And notice how the minor axis is parallel to my guidelines that I use for perspective drawing. They're both going to my single vanishing point. This one's a little easier because we can see a 75-degree ellipse, 55-degree ellipse.
Okay.
There's my vanishing point. And minor axis. So you can see I just roughed out these guys with freehand sketching first, and then I came back with an ellipse guide and tightened them up.
So he does cheat.
There's that little freehand sketch. Very sort of forced perspective. We're very close to this object, or this car in this case. And let's look for some guidelines. There's my guidelines going off to my vanishing point.
Yeah, he's just showing off
page.
at this point.
So that's right vanishing point. There's an ellipse. There's its minor axis. I can't stress this enough for getting good at drawing ellipses in perspective. Is the understanding first the anatomy of the ellipse, second the degree of the ellipse, third how to get good at drawing them repeatedly, and then how to drop them into perspective and then check them to see if you're right or wrong. So don't worry if you draw them loose and they're incorrect freehand, because drawing that little box, you can always double check it, and then you can always grab an ellipse guide, okay, and lay it back on top and fix your ellipse.
Okay. I would have to buy an ellipse guide.
Really, part of this is trying to recognize these ellipses, right, in perspective. Developing your eye to see whether they're correct or not. So there's my minor axis for the rear wheel. There's my rear wheel on the other side of the vehicle. Here's my rear wheel actually on center line. So you can see it's really just one big cylinder going through that car.
Fair enough.
All right, you're good. One more little sketch.
He's really going in with these sketches, man.
Zoom in a bit.
Really, really going in.
So you got a 55-degree. And usually when I'm doing my sketches, you can see I write the number of that degree ellipse. The reason I do that is that if I'm going to blow up that sketch on a Xerox machine or something and then do an overlay, it's nice to have that number there so you don't have to go back and search for what ellipse guide you used. All right, let's get back to some sketching.
Hey, back into it. Okay. There we go.
What I'm doing here is I'm just establishing a view, right? So my vanishing points now are off the page.
Okay.
And I have to guess at where that left and right vanishing point are. There's a vertical, so I have to draw parallel. In this case, it's 2-point perspective. I'm just trying to draw a box. It's kind of the next level of practice. You can see that line isn't quite converging fast enough.
Okay.
Right? I'm going to try to, I'm actually just going to leave it there. I'm trying to correct it with this line. Right? I'm going to draw off to the left vanishing point.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to draw another vertical.
Okay.
So a fairly loose little freehand sketch. But again, reinforcing the things we've discussed already and more practice in drawing straight lines. So I usually start with the bottom corner, right, and then drop in some guidelines.
What the heck is he going to do?
In this case, I'm just drawing guidelines. I'm not really trying to define an object.
The heck is he
You see I'm drawing those little points? Those little points, I'm trying to estimate the convergence being the same with every line I draw. So I'm going to set the convergence here to the right. This is what I call like a 45-degree view. It means the convergence is the same to the right as it is to the left. So again, a little pie shape there, trying to get that convergence to be the same.
Okay.
And now that I have that little perspective guideline grid, right, let's drop in what I think would be a vertical. So you sort of have to imagine where the horizon would be. I can see where those two lines are nearly making a straight line at the top. That would be my horizon. So I draw a line parallel to that vertical, draw another parallel to the vertical. And now I'm using these guidelines to help me to draw a box. I'll pick this line, for instance. More often than not, this is actually how I start all my sketches, is I draw just a series of guidelines that run through my entire page. Then I go back into that series of guidelines and I pick out my shape.
So basically he just drew a box. Basically what he did.
Let's talk about another way to generate a view.
Okay, talk to me.
All right, I'm going to use the ellipse here to establish my perspective view. You saw me just do it with a box and then just some guidelines.
Okay, fuck it.
You see, by effectively drawing those two ellipses, right, we know where the minor axis goes, and it has to go to the left vanishing point. So by drawing those ellipses, I actually drew or hinted at where the left vanishing point would go. So you don't always have to draw the minor axis and that sort of stuff first. You can start first with the ellipses. Let's do another one of those. There's an ellipse, and here's another ellipse. So knowing that the degree is further away, so there I hinted minor axis that way, minor axis that way. I can connect across the bottom, right? So effectively, I now have a perspective grid, right? The take a guess at the vertical. Right, so I have left vanishing point defined. Let's draw a vertical on this one. There's vertical. Looks like a little bit of 3-point perspective I'm going to hit here. So there's the other vertical, because I have to draw where that ellipse touches the ground. Okay, so that top line, we go to my right vanishing point. Let's do a vertical here. Intersects the ground. Right, and you can put that vertical where you know it has to touch tangent to the ellipse. I can draw across the front. I'm actually using my guidelines that I've established with my ellipses, right, to help me draw this box. You can see it's sort of a very roundabout way. If you're very comfortable drawing ellipses, you can end up with a box, even though you start with an ellipse. So again, it all comes back to that understanding of those fundamentals, right, of the anatomy of ellipses, how you place ellipses, how all of that stuff is interconnected. So again, there's my 3 lines, right? Any 3 lines like that, left vanishing point, right vanishing point, and vertical, I know then I can start to block out geometric shapes. So here I'm going to do a little box that's only the half height of a wheel. So I may completely choose to ignore those wheels now and just draw those wheels to get me started with a box. So several different ways that you can establish your view. Let's talk a little bit more about that. It's really your first step in doing a perspective drawing is establishing your view, trying to decide, do I want to look down on my object? Am I looking up at it? What's the convergence of my guidelines? So really, many hours spent practicing these sort of exercises will really pay off later when it comes time to start drawing shapes, which we're getting close to adding up sections and drawing some actual forms. So here I'm going to draw out a grid. So I'm trying to just, again, a guess at my perspective convergence. Each time I draw a line, I'm not necessarily trying to draw foreshortened lines in space, just literally trying to draw another set of lines converging at the same pace. If I do that, I know that those lines should converge, right, to a vanishing point that's off my page. So really, this is great practice in trying to do that. If you wanted to double check yourself, you could take this drawing to a copy machine, reduce it, and then actually extend your guidelines until they actually touch, and you can actually see how close you're getting. So each time I draw a new line, I'm actually looking at the lines surrounding it. I'm trying to use those as a visual guide.
That's basically what he just did. Basically, you draw a bunch of random lines and then see where they converge.
So there's a little box made using my initial guidelines. You can see my initial guidelines just run sort of randomly through the drawing.
Okay, makes sense.
Let's repeat that. Again, I'm trying to include some repetition here because I think it's very important to see these exercises happen again and again, and see that each time you can do it slightly different. There's really no set order in trying to lay out these grids, but they're very important. So here's sort of a ground plane that I've defined. Again, those lines aren't foreshortened in perspective. They're just trying to match that pie shape, just trying to hint that they're going to the same vanishing point. Drop in some verticals. And when I draw that line, I'm really looking at my guidelines. Okay, really trying to use them. Here, this one hit on my guideline, so that's lucky. That one's good. And the back looks like I have to draw very close to one of my guidelines. So again, fairly simple. So if I wanted to do that could be a table, let's say, and those are little table legs. And that one goes through the back, and we can just see it right there. Okay, so practice this a lot. It's great. Fill up a sketchbook with this, pad of paper. Buy a cheap pad of paper and just set it aside for this sort of warm-up practice. Practice drawing straight lines. Practice establishing the view. Go from 1 point to 2 point to 3 point. Try to rotate those boxes in space. And just get very, very versed in being able to draw boxes in any orientation.
I can even front. That's good exercise. I might even keep that. Good exercise.
Get
some
more examples here. Here, this is sort of a ground plane start.
Okay, he came up with some stuff he already drew again.
Check this one. Here's another ground plane start. So I just threw in some perspective guidelines and a couple of verticals. That's really all I need. This is going to work nicely into us building some shapes. Here's sort of a box start, right? So if you're comfortable drawing boxes, go ahead and do it that way.
Okay.
Personally, I like to draw ground planes with just a bunch of guidelines and a couple of verticals. You're drawing lots and lots of cars. I have a lot of friends and old classmates and colleagues who start all their car sketches this way. It's just guessing and estimating at some ellipses, dropping in the minor axes, a line across the bottom of each wheel, and a couple of verticals. Again, all coming back to that box grid. Even though it's not technically a box, it still is the same thing if you connect all those lines. So again, minor axis and a line across the bottom. Here's another way you can go. If you're adept at using a 3D modeling program in a computer, you can bash out some very simple grids. So this is a little 2-point perspective grid. I think I did this one in something like Bryce 3D, a very inexpensive, simple modeling program. Again, I don't want a lot of information. All I really want, if I'm going to do a bunch of car sketches, is I like to have a little bit of help. So feel free and use all these things. It'll just train your eye.
Okay, give me a second. He just said Bryce 3D. Hold up. Give me a second. Because we, my dear friend, are going to Google the heck out of that. Okay, so Bryce 3D comes from Daz 3D. Okay. So Bryce 3D Pro. I don't want the Pro. I want the Bryce 3D. That's it. Bryce 3D. Don't give me the Pro, because the Pro would just be really expensive. Ooh, Wrinkle 3D. You can like wrinkle stuff. Interesting. The heck is an Alembic exporter? I don't even know what that is. Okay, so Bryce 3D is basically a 3D software that has a lot of stuff, apparently. They're doing a lot of stuff. You can make grids, you can make hexagons, parameters. Interesting. You have a lot of stuff. Okay. I don't even know what this is, man. Looks interesting, though. I'll give you that much. It does look interesting. Okay, so apparently, no, I don't want 3D models. I just want like that's 3D. Let's see what happens if we put in car. Okay. Interesting. I don't know how he did it, but okay, you would have to learn how to use Bryce to actually make use of Bryce. That's too much work.
To see things in perspective. So I would use that, for instance, as an underlay. Here's an underlay of a 1-point perspective.
Okay.
Previous one being 2-point. There's my minor axis, right? There's some lines on the ground. There you can see a plane on the ground. These many planes. Some planes at either end. Okay. And you can see I went back over those with my ellipse template, and I wrote the degree of those ellipses. So if I was to blow that up on a copy machine, I could not have to search forever to figure out, okay, what ellipse template was that? I just go right back to the number.
Okay, you already said that.
Good to go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, finally drawing again. What are we doing, people?
Let's get into sketching again.
Okay, we're going back into sketching. Yay.
Here, I've switched over to back to the ballpoint pen. Again, one last phase here of sketching boxes and multiplying them in space. And then we're going to move into trying to draw some sections and drawing those sections symmetrically in perspective.
Okay.
And then connecting those. So here I'm trying to draw a cube. So you can see me sort of estimating and lining things up and drawing the air before I draw.
You just drew a
fairly
cube?
Close, not a perfect cube today. And I'm going to extend those lines into perspective. And here I'm just guessing now, right? I'm not drawing an X across the face. I'm just guessing at the halfway point on my vertical. And now I'm going to multiply across. So I'm going to drop in my diagonal. And I'm doing my little auto foreshortening construction again. Now here I will extend that line across to divide.
We're just guessing, putting it right here.
That vertical in half. Draw across from the top corner down. And strike your vertical. So that side of this object is 3 units deep. Let's do it in the reverse direction. Again, I just estimated now. So as I go further and further along with this DVD, you're going to see me sort of guessing, estimating. There I drew the short dimension, right? So that would be a much harder line to draw than across the short way. So again, I chose the easier of the 2 corners. Striking your vertical, then sort of continuing this grid. So you can see I'm building off of one cube, sort of building this perspective grid further and further, extending that line across, sort of looking at that line when I draw the back line. So that's 2 units wide. So I'm 1 unit tall, 2 units wide, 3 units long.
I didn't really know where he was going, but okay.
Again, not as easy as it looks, but a great thing to practice. Like I started to say, I'm going to start to guess more and more. I know the foundation skills. I know how everything should work. So you're going to see me sort of estimating as we go along here. And that's something you start to do as you get more and more practiced in placing these things in perspective. So again, I started with an ellipse, did the minor axis, drew lines tangent to that ellipse. That's effectively identified the front corner of my object. Now in this case, you're going to see me take that ellipse, multiply the box I've drawn around it. And this really, if you're really trying to nail the proportion of a car, which is absolutely critical to whether or not it's attractive, actually, is this first step is really something you need to nail, which is establishing the wheelbase.
Let's put this over there, because that feels way better.
In this last box, I'm going to draw my ellipse. So there we go. My ellipse has been predefined by the size of that box. The degree of it has been predefined. If I just draw an ellipse that touches in the right, touches each side, okay? And there's my guidelines going to the left vanishing point. So I've got 3 wheels in between. I know that because I did the little auto foreshortening method. And let's project across to the other side. So I arbitrarily define the far side of this box. So now I'm just drawing a box around this. Okay, and those boxes were defined by my ellipses. So there I have basically a box with ellipses on the side. Again, another great thing to practice. All of these things will add up towards your ability and really help you to draw very accurate vehicles.
Okay, I see what he's saying, though. I do see what he's saying.
So here, again, slightly different method. Started by drawing a plane. Draw the front side of that object, then go to the back, and then connect across the back. So you can see there are many ways to accomplish the same sort of set of guidelines. Again, it's a little bit repetitious, but I think it's important that that you see me draw these things so that you can
one is way off. Yeah,
see the order I build these. See there are many ways to do the same thing.
Way
I'm
off.
going to draw a little side view here just to reinforce what I did just above. So in side view, if I was looking at the sketch above, there you see I'm just estimating the 3 boxes in between. And the 4th one was my rear wheel, or it could be the front wheel. depending which direction your vehicle is going to travel. But essentially that side view is what you see up above in perspective. This is starting to hint at drawing some shapes. This is just a draft view, so I'm not really getting ahead of us here at all. I'm just really showing you how you can start thinking in side view, and then you can start to translate that into perspective, which we're going to get into that a little bit later. So I'm just starting to think about a little car, just diverging away from our mundane ellipse constructions and boxes. And, you know, I'm just like everyone else. You get bored with these things after a while, and you just got to jump in and do a little car sketch and draw something really bad in perspective to remind you how important these things are. Okay, now to the fun stuff. I've sped this up a little bit for the purposes of being able to include a bit more content on this single DVD.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is drawing a simple plane, and now I'm going to start building sections. This is really where the fun starts, for me at least. Now we're going to get into form building.
Okay, the moment these guys start speeding up their videos is the moment I can't draw with them anymore. Because the moment they start going super fast is the moment that me trying to keep up, which is me pausing the video every few seconds just to keep up with him. I don't like that. So I'm just going to look at what he does for a little bit and then see if I can draw what he did. That will be like the plan. Yeah, that will be the plan. Okay.
So I drew a simple plane. Okay, I'm drawing with a pencil now, so switch medium as well. I estimated the midpoint, project that across, strike a vertical. So now I have a near
really fast right now.
Plane. So those two planes are equal. Right now I'm going to draw a curve. So I'm going to draw a curve inside this near box. So I draw a curve up. Again, this is a design curve. You know, I don't have a pre-described plan that I have to draw this to. I'm just sketching now. So I'm basically designing in perspective, essentially drawing a front view of a section in perspective. Okay, now this is the important stuff. We want to start to translate the same curve to the far side of this plane.
Okay.
So how do you do that? Well, you've got one box on the other side, and you can use that as your guide, okay, to transfer some points. So here I've made a shorter little plane. I projected it across to the other side. So that's one way to transfer a point.
Okay.
Is basically strike in a little construction plane, right? Because you know that you can just make that box to where you want the point to go and then transfer it across. Here's another one. This is the diagonal method.
He's going really
I
fast.
just struck a diagonal I knew was equal to the other side because it went from the middle to the top corner. And then I just transferred across points from my curve where they hit the diagonal. So here I'm striking in another diagonal. See, it's just a random diagonal. I draw it from one side of the box to the other. And then I draw from the middle to that point. So I know those are exactly symmetrical. And then I transfer across. There's another point for that curve. And now you can see I've got 4 points, right? Actually 5 points to help me draw the curve on the other side. This is really the next step. After you get great at doing ellipses, great at doing boxes in any perspective view, it's time to start working into curves into perspective.
Okay.
And you're going to see how different the near side curve as compared to the far side curve look.
I've done this before. This
So
is
I continue
hell
on.
to
And
do.
again, remember I started out this DVD talking about how you are going to have to draw curves through points in space. There's a nice example of curves, right? Drawing through points in space that don't move.
Okay.
There's no sort of, you know, it's with perspective, it's very unforgiving. Once you lay down those guidelines and their conversion to a vanishing point, you know, those points are either right or they're wrong. The symmetrical far side of a man-made object or a section like this could be the section of a boat, could be the section of a product, could be whatever we want. You can see if I flip it upside down, there, it starts to look like a section of a boat hull or something. But those points are really immovable on the far side. So being able to transfer them using your straight line technique is really important. So I'm just beefing it up here with a Prismacolor pencil. You see I got the brush out now. Whenever I sketch with pencil, I try not to use the back of my hand to sort of flatten out and clean off the page. I like to use a brush. Now I'm going to extend this section, this perspective forward. So you'll see me do that a lot. You just saw that line I drew. Whenever I draw a center line on the ground plane, I try to use my...
I can't really follow along, people.
Tip
it's going way too fast.
It helps me not lose my center line. So I extend up with a vertical. Okay, now what? Well, I'm going to sort of repeat the steps I did for the last section. Okay, and if you missed some of the stuff on the last one, don't worry. I'm going to do that several times, just reiterating the same steps. First, I'm going to start this one by drawing the curve first. Right? Last time I mirrored the plane across. This time I'm going to draw the curve first. So you can see there's really no, set order you have to do these. Now I'm estimating the center. Now I'm drawing through that point. Now I've mirrored that plane across. So it's just as simple as that. Okay, that's where that curve touches tangent to my vertical. That's how far in it is from the side. Now I'm just guessing at that one. Okay, now the thing to do is that you don't work from center and guess out. Find the closest point to your plane. Let's drop in a diagonal, and then I'm going to transfer across. So I know now that that curve has to pass through that point. So it leaves from center, goes out to the outside through that point. Just as easy as that.
Okay, I get it.
And I use this over and over and over again, no matter what the orientation. These happen to be, vertical standing sections, but they could be lying on the ground.
Oh man, I haven't done that in a second. Okay, F it, let's go.
I'm going to make it a little darker so
what
we
he
can see
said
our primary
was
section there through our construction lines. So just freehand
if
sketching, making that a little bit darker. After you've done your initial freehand sketch, feel free to grab some sweeps to tighten these things up. I like to do it all freehand, but I think it's just because I'm a little bit impatient. And I also sort of have the romantic idea of always trying to hone my skills with freehand sketching. So I'm going to connect those 2 points with a pretty much a straight line. I'm going to do the same. So our silhouette for our object really is a result of our sections, right? The silhouette has to pass tangent to those 2 sections. Then I have a crease, right, running right along the center line, so I can connect those 2 peaks. You can see how that peak crosses over, right, the silhouette of the back a little bit. So I'm gonna beef up that line a little bit, make it overlap. And as it comes towards the front, I'm gonna let it fade a little bit. I'm gonna come back here and beef up the silhouette a little. I'm gonna hit this one where it hits the ground. So there we go. We've got our first complex form using all of our previously discussed straight line constructions. So I'm gonna whip out a bunch of these for you and show you there's several different ways to build form. I'm starting with this sort of ground plane construction first, so I'm dropping in some guidelines. Pretty fast convergence on this one. That tells us we're pretty close to the object. It'd be like using a shorter focal length lens. Striking in some verticals, approximately parallel. Again, it's all still freehand sketching. So things are going to be a little loose, and that's fine. It is still a sketch, but you're still using some very strong sort of perspective drawing principles to help you along the way. Okay, here I like to imagine center line first. So that's the center of my object, and it's essentially drawing the side view. Here I'm going to draw the top view. So on my ground plane, which could be a tabletop or literally the ground, I flip my drawing upside down, and this is really going to be 1/2 of my top view. So you see I'm drawing a sketch line there and projecting out to the center line. So a little cleanup. Then I have 1/2 of my top view. Okay, and I always start by building most of my sketches for form. I usually draw the longest lines first, as opposed to stacking up a bunch of sections front to back and then trying to connect through this center line and hoping that I get a smooth line. I think you're wiser to pick your longest lines first. So I just drew across the top of each intersection. Then I'm going to draw a little box, little plane, which is the intersection of my top view and my center line. So wherever my sections, those guidelines, crossed at the ground, I drew these little planes. And now I'm going to come back in here, and now I'm actually designing my front view sections. So another set of section lines. And this is really just 1/2 of my shape first. I'm just drawing a similar section inside each box. Run that down to where it hits the top view. And there you go. I essentially have got 1/2 of my shape drawn. So I've got a side view, a top view, and then 3 sections to that simple shape. All right, now the next step is to mirror this shape to the other side. So here what I'm doing is drawing a guideline, not a very nice one, but drawing a guideline that is supposed to be in perspective, right, parallel to my center line. So I'm going to do a little X dividing across. There we go. I found the foreshortened center of that plane. Transfer it across. Find the midpoint, right? Go from corner through the middle till it intersects my guideline on the other side. That's the full width of my object. So I know that's the absolute widest point on the other side. Okay, well now what? Well, we've got these 2 guidelines either side. I can repeat my same steps. I can build those boxes up. I know the widest point was there, right? I can drop in a diagonal. There's my diagonal. Transfer across, there's a point. That's really all I need to help me draw that curve on the other side. So boom, there's the curve on the other side. That's 1 section complete. So the idea is to repeat that process. Well, where's that one? Well, I'm actually just guessing now. So the more adept you get at doing these things, right, you can start to guess. There's a little diagonal. Just put it in where I need a little bit of help, right? Transfer the point across. That's the vertical part of the curve, a little transition, back to center. How about the front one? All right, there's the intersection with the ground plane. There's my widest point across. I know if I extend that across and complete it, I could draw a line from corner to corner, same line on the near side, corner to corner, transfer across, there's a point. Okay, so I'm drawing my top view on the ground on the other side. I know it has to go through that point, I know it has to touch tangent right here, and I know it has to taper back to a point. So there I just made the top view symmetrical on the far side. Again, drawing through this thing like it's invisible. Little diagonal construction again, transfer my point.
This is what perspective is.
And a little bit of help. So tell my curve has to transition through that point. The last thing I do is I do the silhouette, right? So really it's working from the inside out, like this thing is like an old airplane or something, or a boat, where you build all your bulkhead sections first, and then you skin it after the fact. So there's my silhouette.
Don't know what it is, but whatever.
My silhouette, all it has to do is touch tangent to each one of my sections. Okay. So that was the silhouette up across the top.
Interesting, though.
And effectively, that's done. Very complex form. 3 sections, a top view, a side view, sort of designing on the fly. Okay, let's move into a different type of form building in perspective. This one is it's kind of a subtractive form building. I like to start building this type of form with a box first. The last example was really inside out form building, where you start with center line, build your sections, and then in the end you skin it. This one is somewhat about subtraction, where you start with a box. And there's no right or wrong way to do these things. And this one actually is going to mix a little bit of the previous technique. But you start with a block, and it's kind of like you have a block of wood or something, and you're going to carve away at it. So you're actually going to subtract form away from this. So it'd be more like traditional sculpting or something with a hard medium. So there's your first little line sketch. Just start by drawing a box.
Okay,
it helps you to visualize and get the overall proportions. And next, you're going to start now by drawing the side view of this shape on the side of the box, whereas the previous one started with the center line. And now I'm going to drop in a couple of vertical lines. And these are going to be the spot where I'm going to place my sections that are going to run across the shape. And I'm doing this in order to transfer that curved side view line to the other side of the box. So I'm again drawing through like it's invisible. Strike a vertical there, strike another vertical, and now transfer the curve to the other side. So there's 1 point across, and I'll take the second section point across, and there it is. And we might like to have a little bit more help over here at the front, so you can put in a little guideline going back to the right-hand vanishing point and then transfer across. So you can see you can use verticals, or you can work the other direction as well. Now I've got my 3 points for help to draw that line and connect it back to the back. So there we've mirrored that line to the other side. So it's just like we've extruded straight across, like a bent piece of paper at this point. And now I need to work back to center if I want to add more form to it. So in this case, again, the X technique to find the foreshortened center of that plane and draw the vertical. My vertical looks a little bit off there, so let's correct that a little bit. There we go. And now I'm going to mark my center line on the bottom of my shape, or again on the table. And now where it crosses my sections, I project up, okay, until it crosses my horizontal lines of those sections. And I can go back and I can connect across for the third point. Now I'm going to drop in the center line. And there it is at the back. So I sort of repeated the process we did on the far side, and I put my little tick marks there so I don't lose my center line. Okay, now I have some options. You could keep carving away. In this case, I'm going to sort of do what we did on the last example, which is to build up. So I'm now going to add a bulging section across the top of this shape. And then you can see at the back here, I'm going to go down and actually make it go concave at the back. So I've just redrawn my center line with a new center line. And now I'm in a position where I can actually bulge those sections up to that center line and also change my top view. So I'm going to take a simple extruded plane, essentially, a big curved panel, and start to modify it. This is where I'm sort of combining the techniques we've done in the previous steps with this sort of subtractive method of carving away from a box. So take your top view line at the front. It's no longer a straight line. Now I'm curving it out to meet that center line. So there's a curve in perspective. And the bottom is still very flat and straight, still sitting flat on the table. Okay, we have a couple more sections we can add here. Let's curve this section from the sides of this shape up through that center line, the new one. Okay, there's a bulged section up. And here's the next section. Now the back section goes down, right? So it might be a good idea to spin my pad here, help me do a little bit nicer line work. You can see I am drawing using my fingers, but it's still, I'm holding the pencil quite a ways towards the back. So it gives me a nice arc to draw that controlled curve. So there's my main sections dropped in. I have a modified center. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a radius on this. So instead of this hard edge, I'm actually just marking off a couple little tick marks across the top surface and the side surface so I can add a radius. Now I'm going to draw a tangency for where I want my radius to end. So it's sort of a way to control that radius. So I'm sort of designing both sides of where I want my radius to finish. So drawing along the side first, and now drawing along the top of my shape. Now you can connect with sections between those two contact points. So you're continuing your sections, rounding them down from the top surface down to the side surface. And now I've just radiused those sections. And I'm going to do the same here for the top view. So it's like that section just wraps all the way down that shoulder and right down to the ground. And now we need to mirror that across. So again, this is a little bit like subtraction. I'm just now stepping in and I'm sort of eyeballing that foreshortening distance from the outside of my shape inward towards center. And same thing with this one. How far is that in from the edge of my box, and put it on the other side. And let's take the ones along the side of the box, or the side of my shape. So there's one curve. And then we need to add the three other radiuses going up the far side shoulder. So let's transfer the same radius start and stop points. And now you can draw your curves on the other side. And what you're going to see happen here is that the curves are actually going to change the silhouette of our shape on the far side. So again, that's why I call it a subtractive method of drawing, because that silhouette line is going to move in towards center line. And zoom in a bit here, you can see what's going to happen. See, the radius on the near side, it didn't change the way it really looked that much. The section lines changed, but the overall silhouette doesn't change. And here, that line now has to move in. So we draw now a new silhouette tangent to these new sections. So the radius, if I was to actually literally take that block of wood, for instance, and sand off that far shoulder, this is what would happen to the silhouette. So draw a line, a new silhouette line, tangent to those little radiused shoulders, and that's your final silhouette. Now we still have flat sides here. Let's see if we can quickly modify this. So I'm going to think a little bit about top view. Say, okay, let's make the top view, let's have it bend in towards center line. So I've just moved my straight top view line inward towards center. And now let's draw a connecting section down to those new points. So there's a little curve with a little bit of return. Now let's modify the rear one. It's no longer a straight vertical line. It's got a little bit of curvature to it. So we have to connect over to that point. And so I connect that. And now we've modified the side section as well. So you can see it's very easy to start with a box. Establishes your correct proportion. Say you had to fit, package a certain object on the interior of this. It could be a vehicle where you have a cockpit that has to be a certain proportion. It could be something that houses an...
He just said that was easy. He said tangents and fractions. Now, I understand what he was doing, but the way he said it was blah. That was not cool. That was so not cool. No, that was not cool. I get the gist of what he was saying, but nah, seriously, he needs to work on his teaching skills. That was terrible.
Engine, for instance. And if you do that, you can start with a box. Again, start with a cube even, multiply it, and arrive at the correct proportion before you start to round it off. And now what I'm doing is essentially the shape is complete, and I'm just going to beef it up here with a little bit of heavier line work so that my lighter construction lines disappear. Again, the tough thing about doing subtractive drawing, if you want a nice finished drawing, is that you have to draw very, very light, because you end up with a lot of lines out around the outside of your shape. When you do section drawing sort of inside out, you ultimately end up with a nicer sort of, at least I think, a nicer, cleaner drawing, because all your construction stays on the interior.
That was interesting, but
that sort of wraps up this little shape.
Okay.
A little bit more darkening here, and we're done.
Okay.
Okay, next let's do another shape. It's very similar to the second shape I did, which was sitting on that ground plane. This one, though, I want to make it float off the ground a little bit. So the construction is very, very similar, but it just gets a little more complex. So let's start first with a couple of guidelines, as usual. So I'm going to drop in some verticals first, a little guideline across. A few more guidelines. Those are coming from my left vanishing point. A couple guidelines going back to my right vanishing point. You see I'm sketching, holding the pencil way at the end there, so very loosely sketching in and very lightly sketching in my guidelines.
Okay.
I'm also designing here on the fly, so you've got to pause a little, think a little bit about the shape you want to do. I'm going to choose this line as my center line of my shape. So what next? I'm thinking, pausing, trying to visualize the center line. So I'm going to draw on this plane, basically, the center of my shape.
He's going to do the same thing again with the bad teaching.
Trying to visualize my curve. Sort of leaning forward a little bit, and then a nice sweeping curve to the back. And sweeps under. And back up. You see that line's a little bit wobbly because I didn't bother to spin the pad all the way around. So that's really the center line of my shape. Let's extend a couple of these verticals. Okay. A couple of vertical lines. That's where I'm going to place my sections. This one's going to be a little more complex. See, I want the widest point, meaning the top view of my shape, to actually sweep along this curve. So what I do is I first lay in that line along center. So I know in side view, that's really where I want the widest point of my shape to go. Okay. So this is not like the one where we had the flat bottom. This one now has a sort of sweeping shoulder through the entire shape. I'm going to drop and define my ground plane. So take the very front and the very back of my shape, take it down to the ground, extend a couple of guidelines across. Again, these should be going to my left vanishing point. I'm going to draw what do I want the top view to look like. Now see, I don't have to actually draw this in my shape. Right? I'm going to spin the pad here. A little sort of teardrop kind of a shape. And that's what I like the top of my shape to look like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine that top view with my side view. So here I'm going to drop my verticals down until they hit that center line on the ground. And I'm going to project those out to my top view line. So project out to the near side. Correct that one a little bit. Okay. Now, take those intersection points and draw them up. And then I can take my widest point. See, I'm not drawing across the top of my shape. I'm actually drawing at the widest point. And now I can draw a curve. Now, I actually have 3 points for that curve. I have the very top and the bottom of my center line. And I have the widest point, which is the top view on the ground. Let's do our second section. See, there's the widest point. Actually, effectively, I would like that top view curve to happen and wrap down along that side view curve. So again, 3 points to help me draw that shape. What this is going to give me, it's going to give me a very smooth shoulder along the widest point of those sections. So again, project that out, right? That's where it hits the bottom and the top of the shape.
He's going really fast again,
longer,
people.
so I'm going to spin the pad and help myself out of it.
He's going really
go
fast
through that
again.
point and then go back there. So there's a little sort of triangular shape, sort of diamond shape sections.
Okay.
Take the top view up. Center line,
I see what he's doing
bottom.
though, but it's
All right,
going
project
really
those
fast.
out. You see, I'm always moving either in space, in three-dimensional space. I'm never moving diagonally. I'm always moving either up a vertical or back to the left vanishing point or back to the right to find all these points. There's my next section. So I don't even really need my top view up in my shape, but the top view line is going to be given to me by all these sections. Finding my points again. Let's draw from the center line down through this point at the shoulder. Flip the page, and let's swing that line now down to the bottom.
Okay, I see what he's doing though, but I can't really draw this because he's going way too quick.
One here at the front.
Way
draw
too
a little
quick.
box up.
Way too quick.
So you can see it's just sort of like speed form shapes. Not that interesting, but really great practice. Later, you can worry about turning these into actual objects. Okay, the most important thing at this point is to get a sort of mastery of drawing any three-dimensional shape you want. Get some ability in communicating form through perspective, and then you can worry about, okay, what do I want to do with that form? Do I want it to be a boat or a vehicle or a car? Here I'm connecting through all the widest points of my sections, right where that big curved line goes in my side view. I'm now connecting through all those points. Again, need practice in drawing curves through points. So here's the top view, right? Reiterating, that's what's going to happen up here on my shape, but it's actually top view and it's bending like the line we see at center.
Oh man, I almost don't want to draw this.
My shape.
It's
so
going so
it'd be
fast.
very, very useful. If I wanted to put a cut line there, that's what that would look like. Or if I wanted to say light this object from above, that's where our core shadow would go. Again, that's a topic for a future DVD. Now let's do symmetry. So I just take that plane across here.
Okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore.
Section estimating that. And
yeah, I'm done. I'm done.
Section happening there from.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done with following this course. I did not enjoy this course. It's going way too fast. He did show me a few things. He did teach me a few things, but nothing new, nothing too spectacular. Not really worth it. Okay, so I don't know who you are, but thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and have yourself a good day, man. Stay safe out there. Corona is real. Peace.